The needle drops. For seconds of silence before the groove finds itself.
Been such a long...
Then a voice or a chord, or a bass line arrives and the room changes temperature. That was 1976 on a good night. And 1976 had a lot of good nights. The year produced records that everyone knows, the ones that own the playlists and the retrospectives and the classic soul radio stations. But underneath those hits, 1976 carried another layer of music, records that charted, connected, and then gradually slipped from public memory while the bigger names held their ground. Songs that America heard and responded to, that found their way into living rooms and slow dance nights and late-night radio sets, and then somehow lost their grip on the cultural conversation without ever losing their quality.
My whole world turns misty.
These are 7 of those records. Forgotten songs of 1976 that America still carries somewhere half remembered, always recognizable the moment they start playing, permanently deserving of more attention than history gave them. Stick around, because one of these songs was recorded by a Motown legend in the middle of a career the industry had already given up on, and it became his biggest solo moment in years.
Turns my whole world.
Another was written as a political statement that got stripped of its context and turned into one of the most emotionally devastating ballads of the decade.
Heaven knows I've lied.
Both are on this list. 7 songs. Let's go back to 1976.
Long time.
7. Sara Smile, Hall and Oates, 1976. Before Hall and Oates became synonymous with the blue-eyed soul sound that dominated the early 1980s, they were a duo trying to find their commercial footing, critically acknowledged, industry respected, but not yet breaking through to the mainstream audience their talent warranted. Sara Smile changed that. Daryl Hall wrote it for Sarah Allen, his partner at the time, as a private expression of gratitude, not a grand romantic gesture, not a dramatic declaration, but a quiet acknowledgement of what it meant to have someone steady in a life that wasn't always steady. That specificity, that intimacy, translated directly onto the record. It reached number 1 on the R&B chart and number 4 on the pop chart in 1976, the first significant commercial breakthrough of their career and the record that established their particular brand of soul-influenced pop as commercially viable.
Oh, Sara, please, no.
The reason it belongs on this forgotten list is specific. Within 5 years, Hall and Oates had become so associated with their harder-edged 1980s sound that Sara Smile,
I can feel you watch.
The record that started everything, effectively receded from the conversation about their legacy. It is rarely cited as representative of who they became.
Thank you, baby. Yeah.
Even though it was the first proof that they could be anything at all.
Won't you smile a while?
The records on this countdown, the ones that got passed over, overlooked, or outrun by what came after them, are exactly what this channel is built around. Subscribe so every new deep dive finds you.
In the night.
6. Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel, Tavares, 1976. 5 brothers from New Bedford, Massachusetts, who had been recording since the early 1970s without quite finding the record that matched their talent to their commercial moment. That is the Tavares story up to 1976, and it is a story that Heaven Must Be Missing an Angel resolved completely. Freddie Perren produced the track with a disco-influenced arrangement that sat precisely at the intersection of the genre's commercial peak and the soul sensibility that Tavares had always carried underneath the more fashionable sounds of each era. The vocal interplay between the brothers, each voice distinct, the whole greater than any of the parts, is one of the most complete harmony performances in the group's entire catalog. It reached the R&B Top 5 and crossed into the Pop Top 30 in 1976 and became one of the most played records of the summer. Then disco peaked and collapsed, and everything associated with that sonic world was painted with the same brush regardless of its individual quality, and Tavares found themselves in the same position that dozens of genuinely gifted groups occupied in 1979, critically reassessed downward for reasons that had nothing to do with the music itself. The record holds up completely against anything from the era it came from. That it requires rediscovery rather than existing in permanent rotation is the specific kind of oversight this countdown exists to address. From a group that got caught in a genre's fall from fashion, we moved to a voice that deserved a far larger platform than it received. 5. Sophisticated Lady, She's a Different Lady, Natalie Cole, 1976. Natalie Cole's debut had arrived in 1975 with enough commercial momentum to establish her as one of the most promising voices of her generation. The industry's response was to push her toward the middle of the road, toward a sound safe enough to protect the initial investment rather than bold enough to develop what the first album had suggested she was capable of. Sophisticated Lady was the record that pushed back against that pressure without making the push obvious. Chuck Jackson and Marvin Yancey wrote it specifically for her, a lyric about a woman fully aware of her own complexity, comfortable in it, not asking anyone's permission to be exactly who she was. The production gave Cole's voice room to move in ways that the safer material didn't, and the result was one of the most assured vocal performances of her early career. It reached number 1 on the R&B chart and became her second consecutive chart topper, proof that the more challenging material worked commercially just as well as anything safer would have. Hearing Sophisticated Lady now is a reminder that the foundation was always this strong, that the voice was always this complete. Do you have a Natalie Cole record that means more to you than the ones that get the most attention? Drop it in the comments. Those answers always open up the best conversations. Still to come, the records that sit at the top of this countdown, including a performance from one of Motown's most gifted voices that the industry almost missed entirely. We are getting close. 4. Young Hearts Run Free, Candy Staton, 1976. The lyric was written as something closer to a warning than a love song, Candy Staton drawing directly from her own experience of an abusive marriage to create a record that told women, specifically and without softening the message,
You count up the years and they will be filled with tears.
that staying in a bad situation was not the only option available to them. Dave Crawford wrote the track with that specific intent, and Staton delivered it with the urgency of someone who understood the subject from the inside.
Don't be no fool when love really does.
The production wrapped a message of genuine emotional weight inside a groove so irresistible that the record crossed to pop radio and mainstream audiences who received it as a celebration without necessarily engaging with what it was actually advising. That gap between the production's joy and the lyric's seriousness is part of what makes the record remarkable and part of why it deserves more attention than it typically receives. It reached the R&B Top 5 and the Pop Top 30 globally in 1976, but its depth has been under-acknowledged in proportion to its commercial reach. Candy Staton had several subsequent R&B charting records but never fully broke through to the mainstream recognition her talent warranted. Young Hearts Run Free remains the record that most completely demonstrates what she was capable of, a song that said something true, said it beautifully, and dressed it in a groove that made it impossible to dismiss.
Don't love you.
If this countdown is bringing back records that deserved more than they got, share it. The only way forgotten music finds new ears is when someone passes it on.
Don't love you.
From a record that said something important while making it impossible to look away, we move to one built entirely on quiet dignity and grief.
My mind must be free to learn.
3. Walk Away from Love, David Ruffin, 1976. David Ruffin's voice had been one of the defining instruments of Motown's golden era. The lead on My Girl, on Ain't Too Proud to Beg, on records that had helped build the label's commercial foundation in the mid-1960s. By 1976, his solo career had not delivered the sustained commercial breakthrough that his talent warranted, and the industry narrative around him had begun to reflect that gap. Producer Van McCoy built Walk Away from Love around a string arrangement so lush and so precisely calibrated to Ruffin's voice that the record sounds inevitable, as if no other combination of vocal and production could have produced the same result. The lyric places the narrator in the specific emotional position of someone who knows a relationship is damaging and cannot make themselves leave it, the pull of the familiar stronger than the knowledge that the familiar is wrong. Ruffin delivered it with a rawness that suggested the material was not entirely fictional, a performance where the control in the voice and the emotion underneath it exist in productive tension throughout the record's entire runtime. It reached number 9 on the pop chart and the R&B top 5, David Ruffin's biggest solo commercial moment, and a record that demonstrated exactly what his voice could do with the right production behind it. The follow-up singles did not connect with the same force. The industry moved on again. The record remains the clearest evidence that the gap between David Ruffin's talent and his solo commercial legacy was a failure of circumstance rather than a failure of ability. From a voice that deserved more chances than it got, we arrive at the final 2, the most emotionally complete records on this entire countdown. 2. Harvest for the World, the Isley Brothers, 1976. The Isley Brothers released this at the height of their commercial powers, the period following That Lady and Fight the Power, when they had established themselves as one of the most versatile and commercially successful acts in R&B. They could have released anything in 1976 and found an audience. They chose to release this. Ronald Isley wrote the lyric as a direct meditation on inequality, on a world where abundance exists alongside poverty, where the harvest of human effort is distributed so unevenly that the same planet contains both excess and starvation. The production wrapped that message inside an arrangement of unusual beauty strings, gospel-influenced harmonies, a gentleness that made the seriousness of the subject accessible without softening it into something comfortable. It reached the R&B top 10 and received critical praise that acknowledged the ambition behind it. But within the broader Isley Brothers story, a catalogue so large and so varied that any single record exists in the shadow of a dozen others, Harvest for the World has not received the sustained attention its quality merits. It is one of the most complete artistic statements the group ever made, a record where the social and the spiritual and the musical exist in exactly the right proportion, where the message and the sound serve each other without either one compromising the other. Which Isley Brothers record do you return to that most people overlook? Drop it in the comments. The less obvious answers are always the most interesting ones. 1. Misty Blue, Dorothy Moore, 1976.
Just a mention of your name.
The voice on this record does something that requires explanation. It does not perform grief.
My mind, but I can't.
Bob Montgomery wrote Misty Blue in 1966, and the song existed in various recorded forms for a decade before Moore's version arrived.
In my heart, I know I've lied.
The Jackson, Mississippi native, recorded it for Malaco Records, a small independent label that would go on to become one of the most important homes for Southern soul music, with a production so spare and so carefully constructed around her voice that there was nowhere for the performance to hide. It spent 3 weeks at number 3 on the pop chart and reached the R&B top 5, the largest commercial moment of Dorothy Moore's career and one of the most affecting ballads of the entire decade.
Been such a long
Then the mainstream moved on, as the mainstream does, and Misty Blue settled into the category of records that serious soul music listeners know and most casual listeners have forgotten.
looks like I'd get you.
The performance is as complete as anything recorded in 1976. The voice never oversinks. It never reaches for effect. It simply stays inside the lyric, inside the blue, inside the missing, inside the particular grief of a love that ended and left everything slightly wrong-colored afterward, and trusts the listener to meet it there. 50 years later, that trust is still fully justified.